Hey guys, welcome back to Franchise Tagged. I'm Elijah, my co-host here, Gabe. Today's video, we're going to be going over the kind of coaching carousel of the NFL, the hirings yet to be made, the hirings that have been, and kind of our analysis of them and what those coaches might bring to their new teams. So I'm going to kick us off real quick, jumping right into it with the not team with the first overall pick, team that traded that first overall pick to the Bears, the Panthers. Panthers were in a pretty big hole, I'd say, trying to fill this position, and they went ahead and they got Dave Canales. I think that he's the best option that they could grab because they're not going to be going and getting the top end coaching talent that's available because those top end coaches know that there's better situations. They're not going to settle for the owner who's in the news for not great things, the owner who has a history of kind of being overbearing with the team. For example, David Tepper, even rumored last season, kind of forced the team to draft Bryce Young over CJ Stroud. So take that with a grain of salt, but if that is what happened, then I think a lot of Panthers fans wouldn't be very happy about that. With all of those problems, without having a first-round pick, they still managed to get Dave Canales to kind of jump from a division rival over into the Panthers side of things. And I'd say that he's having a pretty historic, really good rise up coaching ranks. He went from just being a quarterbacks coach 3 years ago to then a offensive coordinator, and now he's going to be a head coach. He's kind of gotten this merit as a quarterback whisperer. As a quarterback coach, he worked with Geno Smith, and that was right after Russell Wilson got traded, and he kind of propelled him to the stardom he had for that season. And we've seen that kind of drop off without Dave Canales there. So, grain of salt, of course. There's all this credit that goes around different places. But in terms of Geno Smith, I'd say that, he deserves some of that credit because we also saw him do it again as an offensive coordinator with Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield went ahead and had one of his best seasons since entering the league. And he's kind of cultivated that quarterback whispering kind of mindset around him, that aura. And so he's going to transition to trying to fix up Bryce Young, something that the super quarterback whisperer heavy staff of last season didn't do very well. So I'm just going to wrap up the Canales section here, kind of talking about the improvements we saw. So the season he had with Geno Smith had 69.8% completion percentage. He passed for 4,282 yards, 30 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, and a 100.9 passer rating. And a not so dissimilar stat line for Baker Mayfield, who was 64% completion percentage, 4,044 yards, 28 TDs, 10 interceptions, 94.6 passer rating. Super kind of 2 TD drop off, 1 interception drop off, a little bit drop off in passer rating, get a bit of yards, but I'd say he's done good in this kind of quick rise to recognition, and I'm not sold on it. Obviously, he's had no real past history or anything regarding a head coaching job, so I'm not going to buy into the Panthers out of nowhere, but I think that he's the best that they could do given, as I have said, the kind of downfalls they have.
Yeah, and I think that Baker Mayfield's revival, his career revival that he's undergone, is really what shot it into the stratosphere. I think Geno having a good year could be chalked up to, he never got a fair shot. He was always on bad Jets teams.
He has to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And now Baker, it's we saw him in off season before this past season, and he didn't look great. And all of a sudden, he's leading a team to the playoffs and beating the former Super Bowl losers. And
Super Bowl runner-ups. Make it sound nicer, at least.
Super Bowl runner-ups. Super Bowl contender. Anywho.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I like him as a hire, but I also worry because we've seen, Geno to Baker, there's a drop-off in every stat. There were less interceptions, but there were less touchdowns, less yards, worse completion percentage, and worse passer rating. And I worry that it's because he went from focusing only on the quarterbacks to being the full offensive coordinator. And if he's taking a step up further to head coach, is he going to still be able to have that impact on Bryce Young? And obviously, I think Bryce Young's a little bit more talented than Baker and Geno, and hasn't fallen off necessarily like they may have.
Yeah, he doesn't have like the years and years of kind of that like being counted out, being written off, as Geno Smith kind of famously said.
Yeah. He's got the 1 year with
compound.
a terrible supporting cast and bad coaches.
Yeah.
So I don't know how much whispering he's going to have to do to Bryce, but I'm interested to see how it goes. And then I think that's it for you for Canales.
Yep.
So next up, we're going to go to my boys, my team, the Patriots, who hired Gerard Mayo, and I am over the moon excited about this. It was basically an eternity of Bill Belichick, and then
your entire life, right?
Yeah, no, my entire life, yes. So my entire life, Bill Belichick has been the head coach of the Patriots, and now there's a new face in town, and a new face, not really. He's been around for around 15 years. He did take a little break from the organization because he was drafted in 2008 in the first round. I think it was their earliest first round draft pick in the Brady Belichick era. And then he ended up playing for the team until the 2015 season. And then from 2015 to 19, he had retired and was just chilling. And then in 2019, he came back as the inside linebackers coach, and then transitioned to the head coach currently this offseason. We have spoken on it a little bit before in our podcasts, but I guess the assumption that I have for Gerard is that he's just going to be implementing the same system that he's been implementing for the past 5 years, and that is Bill Belichick's scheme. And I don't think he's going to be able to run it as perfectly as Bill did, but I do think that because it was written into his contract that he would end up taking over for Bill Belichick whenever Belichick ended up leaving, I think that the Patriots, or like the ownership, the GM, or well, GM's Bill Belichick. Anywho, but the front office basically had confidence that Gerard would be able to implement a similar, or at least similarly successful defensive system to what Bill did. And then the other thing that I really like it for is that player to coach pipeline that we've seen with guys like Dan Campbell, with guys like Antonio Pierce very recently. And
yeah, we're talking to him in this video.
Yeah. But that pipeline kind of creates a nice environment for players to go into where they know that the coach understands them because he's been in their shoes. Whereas if it's somebody like, I don't want to say a coach's name and have them actually been a former player, but like Bill Belichick or Pete Carroll, who I don't feel like had playing careers, they're just
in the
minds
NFL,
in the game. And I feel like there's a little bit less of a relating that you can do to them. So
yeah,
I think that also going from a coach in his 70s to a coach in his 30s, there's a bit of a culture difference. So it'll be a little bit more relatable for guys coming out of college, for free agents signing there. There's going to be a little bit more of a relatability between the coach and the player rather than somebody who's, a grandfather and also coaching guys in their 20s. So, and obviously all this is said, huge respect to Bill Belichick. Shout out, greatest coach of all time as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, but in my opinion, the ceiling of Gerard Mayo is just a younger Bill. And I don't think he's going to become some offensive mastermind that conducts an amazing offense. But I think that the ceiling of him is that younger Bill Belichick who can implement the same defense, and maybe even better because he won't stick with the same coaching bush that the Patriots have had, bringing people back over and over and over again. And if he can bring better coordinators and positional coaches in than Belichick did, then as long as he can implement that defensive system, he's good in my book. And then obviously, unfortunately, the floor is the depths of Tartarus, as we haven't seen him in a system not run by Bill Belichick. So as a player, as a coach, we have not seen him in a system run by anybody but Bill. So we don't know what he is. So
if he decides to kind of tangent off and not just implement the same defensive scheme, like I'm sure he would obviously keep parts bits and pieces. But like if he were to just, oh, I'm going to flip it to being this way, and then that just does not pan out, that could not be great. But I think another point to be made is that he's not the GM. Bill had a lot on his plate. I think that Gerard Mayo just kind of sitting back, being the coach and not being the organization, like it kind of felt like Belichick was. Felt like there's the craft, and then it was Belichick, and those were the names to know. So now with like GM to kind of get that personnel coming in and just less delegation on Mayo, that might be looking, a little bit better of a scenario for him.
So yeah, with all of that, the last thing I have to say on it really is that my confidence is so high because of that prior contract, and not just because of that prior contract where they basically said, Gerard, you're going to be the next head coach, but because the fact that Mike Vrabel was available, and he is also a former Patriots player who has been, for the most part, a pretty damn successful head coach in the league. Not as much this past year, but he's never really been given a great team, and he's always, at least in my opinion, outperformed expectations for the roster that he's been handed.
Definitely.
So with that available, and they're feeling more confident in Gerard Mayo, and I kind of understand it as well. They don't want to completely switch up the system and say, all right, let's get a completely different head coach in here and flip up our scheme that's been working for the past 20 years. So I kind of get it from that point too. But I think in general that confidence gives me confidence as a fan.
Moving on to the Titans. The Titans signed Brian Callahan. He has been the offensive coordinator for the Bengals for the past good few years, 5. So he's not really associated with a Joe Burrow-less team. Just if you want to kind of ignore the fact that Joe Burrow's injuries throughout the years, but he's acted as the right-hand man to Zach Taylor, and yeah, not a big fan of Zach Taylor. I just don't like his face. But outside of that, I think that that's nothing to go against the kind of offensive scheme that they cook up with Joe, being that game managing type. And I think that Will Levis, if you had to put him in a box, he's not like huge. He's not a Mahomes like gunslinger type. Like Eric. No, he's gonna be a like in the box delegation, try to make good decisions, and also have a hell of an arm. Like that's where you want him. And so, looking at the seasons with kind of being that right hand man on the offense, the offensive rankings, they skew heavily. They are dependent on Joe Burrow, but Brian Callahan kind of. I think we'll just throw the picture up, right? So no real need for me to go through this one by one. But 2019, not a great year, didn't have Burrow. 2020, not a great year, didn't have Burrow fully healthy. 2021, offense scored 7th most in the league. 2022, 7th most in the league. And then 2023, we saw all their turmoil, all their troubles this season as well. They still managed to get up to 16th. And yeah, that's generalized. It's not just quarterback work. It's not just anything, but he's an offensive coordinator. He's not just the quarterback anything. I do want to point out that, he's worked with Joe Burrow during his transition to the league. Those developing years, those kind of like crucial ones, that first 4 rookie deal when you have to figure out if a guy's a guy, worked with him through that. He also had stints in Detroit as a quarterback's coach. His 2 years with Detroit with Matthew Stafford in 2016 and 2017 were Matthew Stafford's 2 lowest interception years of his career, up to that point in his career. He's had some lower since because injuries and missing out, but to that point, he did not turn the ball over to the rate that he had been previously. Immediately following that stint, he worked with Derek Carr, 2018, and that was a pretty up-down year for Derek Carr, but the one thing that can be said is that they had the career high in passing yards. So offensively, Brian Callahan, the people who he works with, they tend to excel. And when you also look at, he's coming from a passing background. He's been under Zach Taylor. He's got this passing mindset. He's a quarterback's coach formerly. It's not at all Vrabel's style. Vrabel was the like hard-nosed, like put your face in the dirt and we're going to run over you. Like, we're going to be just the most tough mentality about football. That's the way we're going to do it. And with the kind of roster they have in Tennessee with the possible departure of Derrick Henry, I think that this signing kind of marks a transition for them to a more like, okay, we're going to be passing the ball. We're going to let Will Levis make these decisions and see if Will Levis is the guy. And if he's not the guy, we're going to move on and we're going to find the next guy. But we're not going to rely on old Derrick Henry anymore. We're going to be going through the air. We're going to upgrade our weapons. And that's kind of the route I hope they take here is they turn the Titans into that like, vintage hard-nosed football, and they kind of modernize them into a passing attack that can rival like the top passing attacks of the league. Because as much as we've like dunked on Will Levis, I could see him prosper like in the league. I'm not writing him off like we did Zach Wilson early on. He's shown a lot more than Zach Wilson.
Yeah, in his first game, he looked really good. Will Levis did, and Zach Wilson just never really looked that good. But yeah, with Henry leaving, I think that, as well as obviously the coaching change, but I think that kind of signifies the end of that hard-nosed run-first mentality that this team would have. Now they've got Tajay Spears running the backfield, and he is more of a receiving back anyways. Like he's
more dynamic.
He can get some work in the receiving game, and obviously Derrick Henry did too. He's had his fair share of big receptions, but it's more of like a swing pass and then Derrick Henry run like it's a run play, not as much run a route, which I think is more
run a route someone up.
Game. Yeah. But it's definitely going to be interesting, and I think that they lack weapons on offense. And I think that if they don't take one in the upcoming draft, if they go offensive line, they're going to have a rough year unless they can make some big splashes in free agency or pick up some good depth or good later round guys for their weapons.
Yeah.
I think we can move on to the Chargers, who had probably the biggest name signing in the entire NFL
easily,
with Jim Harbaugh. And he's been flirting with an NFL return for a couple of years now, and it has happened now finally after a national championship victory. So he won college football, and now he's on to the NFL.
Yeah, he won. He upgraded. Yep. He got promoted.
He's, his story, like in the past, I know him as a coach because that was like my formative years of football watching was Jim Harbaugh on the Niners. And so he was very successful with a record of 44-19-1 and was fired after going 8-8, missing the playoffs. And he had basically expressed that like a feeling that he had been abandoned, and the GM and him just weren't on the same page, didn't agree. And so that's kind of like it's not really his fault, but he hasn't gotten another fair shot in the league since. So he spent the past 9 years in Michigan, and he went 89-25 in that span, which, college records.
It's college football. Yeah. Don't compare it to the NFL one. The NFL one is definitely the one to look at when you're thinking like, oh, what's he bringing to the Chargers? Yeah. But
44-19-1 is extremely good as an NFL record. 89-25, I feel like, is okay for a college record. Just because I feel
there were
like
some rebuilding years for the program in there. For sure.
Because if they're bringing in such a big name, they're rebuilding at some point. But yeah, I think this is a good move for the Chargers. I think that it's been going around a little bit lately. I don't know if you've seen it, where Justin Herbert is going to do less than he ever has and get praised more for it because Harbaugh is going to run he's gonna run an old-fashioned offense. He's gonna run the ball. He's gonna draft Blake Corum in the second round, and he's going to run him into the ground.
Mark our words.
And so next mock draft, Blake Corum, round 2,
exactly.
5th pick. Watch it. So anywho, I'm excited to see Harbaugh back in the league, and I hope that he and his brother have a matchup that is a timeless classic. I hope all brothers.
We're going to have our first taste of it pretty early on when the next season slated to play each other. I think that with him coming into the league, Justin Herbert, he is going to do less, but he's going to have a more winning culture, because it felt like everything had to fall on Justin Herbert to win. Meanwhile, this is going to be a lot more delegation.
That's what the general consensus is that Justin Herbert's biggest criticism right now is that he doesn't win games. And so now he's going to do less throwing the ball and do less creating, and he's going to win more games. And so everybody's going to think he's some elite quarterback, which he is, but not because he's going to be winning games. He's an elite quarterback because he can create any play at any point in the game and can play through a broken thumb for 4 weeks or so.
Yeah. Kind of wrapping up that Chargers talk, I just want to say I hope he hits the same success he did with the Niners, like off rip, because that would just feel so much like vindication, for him to be gone so long, come back and still have that impact despite how he was treated with the San Francisco Niners on the way out, So I hope he sees some success here. Yeah. And then transitioning into the next pick here, the next hiring, the Falcons. They got Raheem Morris, and this was definitely someone that I feel no one had as like the Falcons kind of going to.
Not on my bingo card.
Yeah, we had them lean in offense. They just saw horrible offensive usage. They might want to see some better offensive usage, and they end up going defensive minded. So there's like, to me, less worry than if you were to go back, like if you were to run it back with Arthur Smith. This is an improvement easily, because he's not going to be trying to get his hands muddied and like, oh, well, I want to make sure Tyler Algier hits this many carries a game. He's going to let the talent on the offense play how they should. He's going to, I hope at least, that there's not any like... Go ahead.
I think that's going to fall more on the shoulders of the Rams QB coach that he brought over.
Yeah. I think he's not going to be, putting his hands in that. He's not going to be making the meal and being like, oh, you need to add more Algier to that and messing up the whole recipe. Mm-hmm. He's going to be hands off, and hopefully the offense runs smoothly. But if it doesn't, it's not his fault, and they can just go through a different offensive coordinator. I think that the biggest push, like, as you said, with Canales and his kind of usage and resurrection of Baker Mayfield, the biggest push for Raheem Morris to get this attention is what he did for that defense, given all of the young talent that came in. They had Kobe Turner and they had Byron Young, both make a huge impact on that team, on the Rams this past season. So you kind of look at that and you think, okay, that was a really good performance. I think we could use some of that. So they go ahead and they snag him, and he's not unknown in the Atlanta region, because from 2015 to 2020, he served there as a DB coach, as a defensive coordinator, and he was signed on as a interim head coach prior to the worst head coach hiring ever. And then they were like, oh, maybe we shouldn't have done that, and they've gone ahead and gone back to this. So I'm glad that he stayed with the team for that 5-year period. He kind of got his flowers. He had to leave because they were like, oh, we're not hiring you. And now he's back. So I'm looking forward to that. And he didn't do great as a head coach. He was previously head coach of the Buccaneers. He was 21-38 is the winning record for him there. But I think with the state of the NFC South, and obviously we spoke on another head coach hiring for the NFC South to open this video up, but he's chosen over Bill Belichick, who they interviewed twice for reportedly very long interviews. So I think that they definitely have belief in him if they're moving away from like, oh, we're not going to take this, long tenured GOAT coach. We're going to be going with him.
Yeah, I feel like the reason they may have gone with him over Belichick is just age. Because Belichick, he'll have 3 good years of coaching left, and then he'll probably be close to done. He's mid-70s right now. Like, he's not anywhere close to young. And Morris, if he's good, could have a good 15-year run as head coach. And I think the other thing I want to give him credit for, that coaching record, 21-38, that was with bad Falcons teams and bad Buccaneers teams. Like, those were some rough years, and I guess the Falcons would have been after Julio or like tail end of Julio and tail end of Matt Ryan. So that would have been a washed up old Matt Ryan and a getting to be washed up old Julio. So
yeah,
I think that we can cut him a little slack on the bad head coaching record, as well as the fact that he has spent a few years under Sean McVay, who is a very well respected head coach, and he probably has gained something from working under him.
Yeah, I mean, Brandon Staley got hired out. It's not just like offensive side of the ball that like the McVay coaching tree spans. There's defensive talent there, and Staley's a bad point to bring up, but that's more individual. That's not on Morris for his predecessor not being the greatest.
Yeah. Then moving on to the Raiders, this one's not going to be a super long one, just because it's their interim head coach for the year. They decided to keep on for another season at least, and that is Antonio Pierce, who kind of revitalized the locker room. There's not really much else to say other than he dropped 63 points on the Chargers and kind of revitalized the locker room, made the players fall in love with the game again after a couple of years of Josh McDaniels. And that is about all I got to say. I mean, we were both, talking about it all year on the podcast. We're both huge Antonio Pierce guys.
We're huge advocates of like interims in general. Like interims should get better chances because they never get to control staff or make any real decisions during an off season. And especially when there's a guy that turns around the culture as strongly as he did to kind of go 5-4 to end a stretch of what easily could have been a 1-8 for McDaniels. Like he deserved this, and I'm glad he got it.
And he was a good enough mentor and figure to the players that Max Crosby threatened to demand a trade if he didn't get hired on. So it was basically hire Antonio Pierce or lose Max Crosby. And I don't know if I would assume other players might follow suit if Max Crosby's like, hey, I'm not sticking around. Then any other number of players might have been like, all right, me neither. Any
guy up for re-signing is like, yeah, I don't actually want to stay here. I don't care what you offer me. Like kind of sense. Yeah. But that rounds off all the coaches that have been hired into these openings. Now we have the more kind of quick just brain broke down. Okay. 3, 2, 1. That wraps up most of the openings that have been filled, and we're just kind of going to get into the openings that are still available. Kind of just gun through these really quick. So with the Commanders, who is next up on the sheet, Ben Johnson was kind of coined as the guy. And oh my God, we learned today, as of recording, Ben Johnson said, screw off. I'm not going nowhere. You can keep your money and you can keep your head coaching job because I love Dan Gamble. And I'm going to be rocking with this squad for another year. So love you for that, Ben.
Lions fans rejoice.
Lions fans rejoice. I hadn't felt happiness since about the halftime of Sunday at 6:00, whatever clock that would have been timing wise on the halftime. But I hadn't felt happiness since then, basically. And that brought a smile to my face. But with Ben Johnson ruled out because I was seeing so much of like, oh, he's immediately going to announce that he's going to them. They are en route to have a lot of their second interviews come through, the ones that they haven't done, all of that jazz. But I'd say some of the front runners I'm seeing are the Texans offensive coordinator, Bobby Slowick.
Hey guys, just wanted to jump in here real quick and say that yes, Bobby Slowick has announced that he's going to be staying in Houston, and that yes, the Seahawks have gotten Mike McDonald from the Ravens. Those are two things that happened almost immediately after we recorded this video. So bear with us for the rest of the episode as we talk about the Seahawks job like it's still up for grabs. And as we mentioned Bobby Slowick's name, like he isn't confirmed to be staying in Houston. So thanks. We'll try to have more timely information for you guys next time.
Ravens defensive coordinator, Mike McDonald. The Cowboys defensive coordinator, Dan Quinn. And then the Lions defensive coordinator, Aaron Glenn. The Commanders were actually en route through a plane to Detroit to interview with Glenn and Johnson when Johnson announced that he wasn't going to be going anywhere else. So I wonder if that was a little awkward running into each other at the facility.
I know that they said that, yeah, we're still going because we like Glenn. Like,
yeah,
they weren't going to, they weren't just interviewing Glenn to get a shot at Johnson.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely something I think that we don't know at all, like where they're leaning, because there was such a huge focus on, oh, it's going to be Ben Johnson, and now it's not because he made a different decision. So it's all up in the air with the Commanders right now. But if I had to pick personally, I would say it would be like McDonald or Slowick. But I mean, McDonald has all the cards. He can pick his litter.
Yeah.
But if you want to wrap us up.
Yeah, the next team the last team with the head coach opening on here is the Seahawks, who promoted Pete Carroll to front office assistant.
Promoted. We'll see.
Basically, the same names are rumored there. So there's a couple more that are rumored as well. Giants offensive coordinator Mike Kafka and Raiders defensive coordinator Patrick Graham. But those two units, I wouldn't hire coordinators from. I'm going to be honest.
Yeah, I think that's a little far down their line. It just of those other guys, I think take a lot more precedence over that.
Yeah, I think that in general, I really don't know where the Seahawks are going to go. They could go with either Slowick or McDonald, just whoever the Commanders don't get, because I feel like those two are kind of the top names left. But the other names we kind of got to talk about are Bill Belichick and Mike Vrabel. And with Ben Johnson off the table, are these two other teams going to start looking at Bill Belichick and Mike Vrabel as more legitimate candidates? Because if I'm the Commanders and I'm like, okay, well, Ben Johnson is mine, I'm going to sign him, and we've been rumored to get him, and we've been in talks, and we're probably going to get him. I'm not even going to worry about any of the other top candidates and interviewing these guys, because interviewing a top candidate while I have ties to another top candidate is kind of disrespectful to the one that I really want. But now, are they going to go and say, hey, Mike Vrabel, can you come interview for us, and then just go ahead and sign him? Or are the Seahawks going to do that? Or is somebody going to pick up Bill Belichick? I don't know.
I think Bill is a lot less likely here.
Yeah, I was going to say I'm leaning a lot more towards Bill Belichick not having another coaching stint in the NFL. As much as I would love to see it happen.
And Pete Carroll cooking it up.
I would also absolutely love to see Bill Belichick not coach for any other team after the Patriots. Obviously, earlier in his career, he did his thing.
All right.
I would like him to finish off his career a free agent after leaving the Patriots. So, yes. But yeah, you've got a little interesting fact down here at the bottom if you want to go through that.
Yeah, I'll just say this real quick. Regarding the coaches who have been hired in, Brian Callahan, Dave Canales, Raheem Morris have all been on Super Bowl winning staffs. Harbaugh, of course, was one of a losing Super Bowl staff, and Antonio Pierce and Gerard Mayo both won Super Bowls as players. So out of every single opening that has been filled, there's Super Bowl experience. And I wonder how much of that leans into the kind of discussions with these coaches, because obviously a lot of the candidates left don't have that experience, but Bill Belichick and Mike Vrabel do. Yeah. So I wonder if that's at all going to okay, we're going to give these guys another look because we want some more experience of that kind of latitude of importance.
Yeah, I do want to kind of on that same topic, or for the Texans when they went to the playoffs and they were playing the Browns, I said in that episode of the podcast, I said the head coach of the Texans, D'Amico Ryans, has playoff experience as a member of the 49ers staff. Yeah. He's not a head coach who's never been here before. He's a head coach who's never been here before, but as a coach, he has been here many times with the 49ers.
Yeah.
And we see how well that panned out. They didn't lose a step in the playoffs. They lost to what I consider to be the best team in the AFC. And they, before that, beat a team that was really hot. I think that this is probably going to continue to be a trend of getting coaches that have experience, at least in the playoffs, if not in the Super Bowl, and meaningful experience in the playoffs.
Just meaningful, important snaps, like that game rep kind of like mentality that you would have if you were bringing in a veteran like player. That's kind of going to be keeping with the coaching mindset of like, oh, you were on the sideline making important decisions in these game time moments. We want that kind of mindset.
Yeah. But definitely let us know what you think the Commanders and Seahawks are going to do. Let us know where you would want to see Belichick and Vrabel go. Best fits for them. And if you're a Cowboys fan,
a retirement home.
If you're a Cowboys fan, let us know if you want Mike McCarthy or if you wish they had let him go. Because I know as an outsider, I think the Cowboys should have let McCarthy go, but that's just me.
I think that I'm going to not put my hat in that ring. And I'll let the comments decide where my opinion is on that. So make sure you make your voice heard by commenting down below to sway my feeble mind into a direction. And with that, I think I'm about to peace out.
Deuces.